The Battle of Tours took place on October 25, 732, near Tours in west-central France. It was a significant confrontation between the Franks, led by Charles Martel, and the invading Arabs, commanded by Abd ar-Rahman. The battle's outcome had a profound impact on the course of European history. In the early 8th century, the Arab conquests had reached Morocco and the Atlantic Ocean, with the Berbers or Moors providing the necessary manpower for the Muslim armies. Musa ibn Musa, the Muslim governor of North Africa, directed the Berbers towards Spain, where they successfully raided and conquered the entire region by 712. Following their success in Spain, Musa launched an invasion of Aquitaine across the Pyrenees to eliminate the remnants of the Visigoths, but a full-scale raid in 717 to 718 failed as it turned into a conquest operation. The Muslims occupied several regions in southern France, advancing up the Rhône River valley and ravaging Burgundy. At this time, the Franks were ruled by the Merovingian dynasty, with the real power lying in the hands of the Mayor of the Palace. In 714, Charles Martel assumed the title of Mayor of the Palace, and was effectively the ruler of the Franks. In 732, Muslim governor Abd ar-Rahman launched a full-scale invasion of Aquitaine, facing Duke Eudo, the regional ruler. The Muslim invaders defeated Eudo at Bordeaux, ransacking and burning the city. Hearing of the invasion, Eudo sought help from Charles Martel, who was fighting Germanic tribes along the Danube. Charles agreed to assist Eudo on the condition that Aquitaine would submit to Frankish control. Assembling an army, Charles crossed the Loire and met Abd ar-Rahman's forces at Poitiers after they had retreated from their advance. The exact size and composition of Abd ar-Rahman's army remain uncertain, with estimates ranging from 20,000 to 80,000 men. Most of his forces were likely mounted Moors armed with lances and swords, lacking body armor. They lived off plunder and used wild headlong charges as their primary tactic. The Frankish army was primarily an infantry force and smaller in size compared to the Muslim invaders. Only the nobles had horses, which they used during marches. Frankish soldiers were armed with swords, daggers, javelins, and axes for both throwing and wielding. Shields were used for protection. The infantry included the general's private army, paid solely by plunder, and a poorly armed militia. Discipline was lacking on both sides. Charles Martel understood the vulnerabilities of his enemy. He advised Duke Eudo not to interrupt the Muslim march or attack hastily. Instead, he suggested waiting for the Muslim army to be weighed down by their loot, as their thirst for riches would divide their councils and make them easier to defeat. This approach also allowed Charles to waste large areas of land belonging to the rebel Duke of Aquitaine. When Charles's forces appeared, the Muslims were heavily burdened with plunder and became less mobile. Abd ar-Rahman considered abandoning the loot but didn't, possibly fearing a refusal from his men. The two armies faced each other for 7 days, during which Charles awaited reinforcements. The actual battle details are scarce. It likely took place at a site later known as Moussa's La Bataille. The battle began with fierce Muslim cavalry charges, but they couldn't break through the Frankish phalanx formation. Toward dusk, Eudo and Aquitanian forces attacked one of the Muslim flanks and struck Abd ar-Rahman's camp, where the bulk of the loot was kept. Abd ar-Rahman died in the battle, which ended by nightfall. The next morning, scouts reported that the Muslim troops had fled south, leaving most of their plunder behind. Frankish chroniclers exaggerated the Muslim casualties to 360,000, with only 1,500 for Charles's forces. In reality, the losses were likely around 2,000 for the Muslims and 500 for the Franks. There was no pursuit, as Charles, being on foot, couldn't chase the retreating mounted Muslims, and the capture of the loot hindered such an operation. Charles collected the plunder and returned to the Loire. This victory earned him the name Charles Martel, Charles the Hammer. The Battle of Tours marked the deepest Muslim incursion into Europe, both east and west. While it may not have entirely saved Western Europe from Arab rule, it solidified Charles's dominance in Gaul and allowed him to establish the Carolingian dynasty, which reached its zenith under his grandson Charlemagne. Charles later overran Aquitaine and compelled Eudo's sons to pay homage to him. The Muslims eventually withdrew south of the Pyrenees for good.